Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on which part of the world you are in. A very warm welcome to our panelists, our presenters, as well as the audience. My name is Sujata Gupta. I'm the Director for East Asia Infrastructure with the Asian Development Bank. And I would be your moderator for this session. A couple of housekeeping announcements first before we get into the substance of the discussion. Please pose your questions in the chat box for each presentation, and these would be responded to at the end in the Q&A segment of the session. Also, all videos as well as presentations are available on ADB's website, that is the Transport Forum website, or on the partners web or organizations site as applicable. So with these housekeeping arrangements clear, let's move on to the objective of this session on knowledge solutions for tomorrow. Now, we all know that transport is a vital pillar for development. In Asia, the sector is growing very rapidly. However, many cities and regions are already facing the negative impacts, for example, on the environment and safety of this growth in transport. And current trends indicate that this would get worse. Therefore, we have to develop the sector guided by the Sustainable Development Goals and other international agreements like the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. And for this, it's very important to have knowledge solutions and innovations that are not only developed, but also shared. And hence, partnership and collaboration is key to learn from each other. Also, for the Asian Development Bank, our vision statement, Strategy 2030, looks at promoting knowledge and knowledge solutions as one of the guiding principles. And this has a country-focused approach and also promoting integrated solutions across different sectors, not only just one sector. So with this, let me introduce the first presentation for the session, where we would be looking at ADB's recent publication on reimagining the future of transport across Asia and the Pacific. And what this focuses on is looking at transport projects that are designed not only for today, but also for tomorrow's reality. The session provides insights into mega trends shaping the transport sector in the region and is designed to inspire project teams and policy makers to explore new pathways and approaches for investment, planning, and transport policy. The team is represented by Alexandra Pam Chiang, Senior Transport Specialist, Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department. Ant Husar, Senior Public Management Specialist, Digital Transformation, also with the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department of ADB. And Rebecca Stapleton, Transport Specialist, East Asia. So let's hear more from the project team.
Hi, I'm Pamela Chang. I'm Senior Transport Specialist, and my main role in the Transport Sector Group is to support transport teams in decarbonizing transport. I advocate for multidisciplinary approaches in strategy formulation and project design, as I firmly believe that a sector like transport cannot decarbonize on its own. We need collaborative efforts with energy sector and cross-thematic solutions for environment and climate aspects.
Hi, and I'm Ant Hussar. And on my day job, I look after digital transformation in ADB's activities with developing member countries, be it startup ecosystems, satellite connectivity, or digitalization strategies. At the same time, I also moonlight as a foresight specialist for various ADB activities, including the one that we're showcasing today.
And I'm Rebecca Stapleton. And when I'm not working with the transport sector or helping to embed design thinking principles into operations, I take care of projects in the People's Republic of China and in Mongolia. I am passionate about integrating more human-centered design into the way that we identify and develop our projects. And I tend to make my life more complicated by doing things a bit differently.
So we finally published our Foresight report on reimagining the future of transport. And on this occasion, we're having this little chat to be shared at the 2022 ADB Transport Forum.
Indeed, and what a journey that was, taking us from early explorations of futurist thinking and foresight methods to an actual product.
I think we need to explain a little what foresight is about and why this is particularly relevant in the times we live in. Maybe Arne can tell us a little more.
I'd be happy to. So in a nutshell, futurist thinking really represents a collection of approaches, methods, and tools that are used for systematic, participatory intelligence gathering about all possible futures, whereas strategic foresight can help with medium to long-term vision building, which is aimed at enabling present day, today's decisions and actions that are more anticipatory, more future ready. They are not a science that predicts the future, but rather an art that explores a wide range of futures, teaches us anticipatory thinking, and makes us more agile in how we act in the face of rapid change and disruption.
Yeah, and I have to say that going through the process, that description makes a lot more sense compared to the first time that I heard it. I particularly like that foresight helps us to step away from reactive problem solving to see that bigger picture and improve decision making. And it also provides us tools to anticipate and navigate some future challenges. We know that our clients are evolving rapidly and that simple infrastructure projects are no longer ADB's business. Our clients can do those on their own. Low-hanging fruit has already been picked. And it's actually in those more complex development challenges that the clients are coming to us to assist and to help. So, we're facing unprecedented challenges in terms of climate change, fiscal constraints, persistent poverty and inequalities, a fast rate of technological change, and rapid environmental degradation.
Yeah, and precisely this is the space where I have seen foresight approaches offering ways to systematically work through these complexities, to be more aware of our assumptions and preconceptions that really hold us back from seeing beyond the present day issues and solutions, actually. Challenging ourselves not to brush aside our uncertainties, but to instead go deep dive into them. Frankly, there's little certainty nowadays. The time period that people would describe as certain has certainly narrowed. And that makes it all the more important to explore methods that can help us navigate uncertainty.
I remember we first talked about working on a project together in February 2020, and that was when the pandemic had just been declared. So we took a bit of a chance because this is the first time that ADB seems to have taken such a futures thinking deep dive into one sector. The transport sector group wanted to take a new direction in how we think about strategy, about project identification, project design, and even implementation. So we used the opportunity of this disruption to do something quite different.
Yeah, and right from the start, we wanted to make this broad-based and participatory, but our dreams of in-person workshops were shattered very quickly. But we involved our community, including many ADB colleagues and external experts, through virtual workshops. And that was still quite innovative at the time in 2020 when virtual collaboration was still very new. We organized a series of training programs, and we partnered up with Arup, a leading foresight consultancy with technical expertise also in the transport sector. And they took charge of helping bring all this together in a cohesive manner.
So let's take a peek so our viewers know what we're raving about. So we ended up producing 3 main assets: the trend cards, our main report, and a playbook. So tell me, which is your favorite?
You know, that's a really difficult question to answer. But, you know, the trend cards are super useful for meetings and for workshops, and there's something that we can make use of right away. There's 10 trends that were covered with 3 sub-trends each. So that totals 30 emerging themes. And they were deliberately designed as cards that can be used as an asset in a face-to-face workshop or a virtual workshop, as it may be. For my work, I would probably pick behavior patterns and advanced technologies as 2 of the trends that are most relevant.
They did come out really nicely. So how would you use them, Rebecca?
We can use them in lots of ways. I'd use them in a report or to obtain ideas, to open a discussion with government or another client, or in a workshop where we could explore with project stakeholders which ones they feel are most relevant to them.
Nice. So my favorite is actually the main report, which is the visions report. It sets out 8 draft visions to support users on their own foresight journey. And here is an example of the vision on delivering environmentally considerate outcomes. So for this, the desired future is future transport infrastructure and systems will deliver environmentally considerate outcomes that go beyond mitigation to enable transport to support restorative and regenerative ecosystems. So to ensure relevance across a wide range of users and country contexts, considering different development and readiness amongst countries, we developed 3 levels of incremental strategies under each vision. So let's take, for example, the principle on accelerating low carbon development. The baseline strategy, which presents basic levels of ambition that a country or practitioner should adopt. This includes low carbon development. And the next level, we look at progressive strategies, which will push the boundaries of what is possible. And this includes low carbon systems planning. And transformative strategies represent the most innovative ideas. And an example of this would be carbon neutral, inclusive transport systems. So these incremental strategies are also in line with ADB's policy to apply differentiated approaches for different country typologies. And due to the rapid development and evolution of technologies, these strategies should not be viewed as an exhaustive set of recommendations, but rather a starting point to inspire practitioners and project teams to embark on their own foresight journeys to develop future-ready strategies and projects. So Arndt, you co-authored the playbook. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about it.
Yeah, sure. So really from the start, you both have been hearing me preach about context, 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 context. A report of this kind, there's really a vast range of national or local contexts that we would encounter in our member countries. And while we already factored in the different levels of ambition and varying baselines, this means that our report provides you really just with the jumping off point, a solid base to then contextualize and adapt to your thematic focus area, your location, or your key challenges. Edit, change, adjust, delete, feel free to make this material your own. I'm super happy that we were able to create this playbook, which, by the way, was already tried and tested in our ADB training sessions. It was produced to support users like you on your foresight journey along 4 possible pathways, be it developing a vision or a strategy, or you might just want to make your project more future ready. The playbook is packed with simple instructions on how to design a futurist thinking or foresight process, and it comes with a set of worksheets that one can simply print and use in a workshop. This way, one can leverage the main report and the trend cards to dive in quickly.
This is fantastic. Great. So we highly encourage everyone to explore with these materials, and you can download the report from the link shown here, and we would be really keen to hear about how it goes.
Yes, please. So yeah, please let us know how things go when you use it. And please allow me this moment to just feature what is coming next. So typically, any ADB report really comes alive through case studies. In our case, the report is about transport futures. Since the future is yet to be written, we asked young futurists for help to explore the future realities that are outlined in our report and to describe them through the eyes of an imagined persona. Voices from our futures that can help us bring alive our report, to give you a sense of what it would be like to live these visions, but also to tell us about things that may not have gone so well. So please stay tuned for stories from Rebecca and Willy from Fiji, Rani from India, and Mohammed Hakim from Malaysia. We'll be releasing them soon in a follow-up workshop that will present our project in a lot more depth.
What a journey it has been, and we can't wait to see how this gets used by others and to see where this journey takes us next. Thanks for the chat today, team.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
So thank you, Pam, Beck, and Ann. Very interesting to see the transformative scenarios, which would be carbon neutral. So very, very eager to look at your publication and the documents in detail. Now let's move on to the next session, where we will be looking at country-specific railway sector assessments and regional railway sector assessments with a focus on the CAREC region. Now, the CAREC, or the Central Asia Regional Economic Cooperation CAREC program, is a partnership of 11 countries and development partners in Central and West Asia, working together to promote development through cooperation that would lead to accelerated economic growth and poverty reduction. So its broader mission is to connect people, policies, and projects for shared and sustainable development, and it serves as a premier economic and social cooperation platform in the region. Just to give you an idea, since its inception in 2001, CAREC has mobilized more than 40 billion in investments that have helped establish multimodal transport networks, increased energy trade and security, and facilitated movement of people and trade, of course, and laid the groundwork for economic corridor development. So this very interesting session will be presented by Tyrrell Duncan, who's the transport economist and policy advisor. Tyrrell has over 30 years of experience in international development. He was formerly head of ADB's transport sector group, and prior to that, he was ADB's transport director for East Asia, and the bank-wide practice leader responsible for formulating ADB's sector strategy for transport, which we call the Sustainable Transport Initiative. Tyrrell, warm welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sujata. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be back at the ADB Transport Forum. Next slide, please. Thank you. Because of their lower emissions, railways have a key role to play in transforming and decarbonising transport. I'm going to talk about the railways of Central Asia, showcasing a new study of CAREC railways. This is part of a regional TA helping CAREC countries strengthen the role and performance of railways. A key focus is cross-border freight. The study draws upon railway sector assessments in each of the 11 member countries and included development of a regional transport model I hope you find the presentation interesting. Next slide, please. Next slide. Let's begin in 1990, a year before the independent states were established in Central Asia. Most of the region's railway corridors had originally been built by external powers. Those built by the British Empire are shown in green, by the Russian Empire in blue, by the Soviet Union in red. Also, corridors built by the PRC are shown in pink. Southwest of the Karachi region, Iran's railway network in light blue was still small in 1990 without connections to neighboring countries. Next slide. Now fast forward to 2022. The network has grown considerably and Iran's railway now connects. There are 10 main long-distance corridors, 4 Eurasian east-west corridors, 3 shorter east-west corridors, and 3 north-south corridors. These are mostly sections of corridors built before 1990, repurposed for the region of independent states. The Eurasian corridors are the Trans-Siberian along the top in orange, the Northern Trans-Asian in blue, the multimodal Trans-Caspian International Transport Route, or TITR, in yellow, and the Southern Trans-Asian in green. There's still missing links, particularly south and west of Kashgar, proposed new links in Mongolia, and Afghanistan's proposed ring railway. An important limitation is the lack of railway connections to provide Central Asia access to ocean shipping on the Arabian Sea. Economic sanctions have curtailed use of Iran's ports, while multiple missing links need to be built to access Pakistan's ports. Next slide. As this next map shows, 3 different track gauges are used across the region. The main gauge changes are between Russian broad gauge in brown and standard gauge in blue. These are at Manjoli in northeast PRC, at the gateway to the Trans-Mongolian corridor, and at the 2 gateways between the PRC and Kazakhstan. Next slide. Another striking feature is that there are big differences in scale among the Karachi railways. We distinguish 4 railway types: large railways with high traffic, mid-sized railways with fairly high traffic, former branch lines with low traffic, and railways needing large investments to develop or renew their networks. 3 countries have large railways: Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and the PRC's Inner Mongolia and Xinjiang regions taken together. They contribute 65% of the region's railway network, 71% of passenger turnover, and 94% of freight turnover. There are 4 mid-sized railways in Azerbaijan, Georgia, Mongolia, and Turkmenistan. Each has a sizable network, staffing, and traffic. The 2 former branch lines are in Kyrgyz Republic and Tajikistan. They have much lower traffic as their networks are short and don't attract transit traffic. The countries needing large investments are Afghanistan and Pakistan. Afghanistan recently completed its first short section of railway, but traffic will stay small until it has a larger network. Pakistan has a large network and a large staff, but its network is old and needs to be renewed to carry more traffic. Unlike the other countries, Pakistan has relatively low freight traffic, but high passenger traffic. Next slide. Before going any further, we need to take on board the financial situation of the Karachi railways, which is not good. The larger railways have been making profits in most years, but these have been small, in each case held down by servicing of large debts from past investments. The mid-sized railways have been operating at a loss in most years, while the former branch lines in Pakistan railways have been consistently loss-making. Next slide. Poor financial performance has to be addressed. Otherwise, it erodes the quality and safety of railway services and eventually threatens the very continuation of the railway. Without profits, railways don't accumulate reserves, as they normally should, to finance the periodic renewal of their infrastructure and rolling stock. If we look at the photograph, it shows aged track and worn out wooden sleepers in Kyrgyz Republic. The railway there knows it should renew large sections of the track, but can only afford a limited amount each year. Next slide. Now we turn to policies and institutions. Next slide. As shown in the charts, 3 different approaches can be considered for railway sector arrangements. In the integrated railway model, infrastructure and railway transport services are provided by a single national railway. 9 CARIC countries use this model. A key feature is that the railway is structured around functional departments, not around the main business activities like freight and passenger services. This makes it hard to distinguish the performance of each business and run the railway commercially. While the model worked when railways were the only means of land transport, it struggles when they have to compete in the market for traffic. In the holding company model, each main business activity is a subsidiary company operated as a separate business overseen by a single public holding company. Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan now use this model. To be effective, the government must require the holding company and subsidiaries to operate strictly on a commercial basis. If it doesn't do so, commercial orientation will be less. The third model is the separated model. Railway operations are separated from infrastructure. Typically, infrastructure remains publicly owned, while railway business activities are undertaken by multiple independent companies in competition. An independent regulator ensures fair competition and safety compliance. While no CARIC countries yet use this model, it illustrates how competition can work and suggests directions some CARIC railways could follow in future, especially those with higher traffic. Next slide. I want to, just in passing, mention some related challenges. Railway sector arrangements in CARIC countries often have weaknesses in policy and regulatory oversight, tariff regulation, use of cross subsidies, and the limited extent of private sector participation. Within the railway organizations, problems include inadequate accounting systems, lack of enterprise resource planning platforms, overstaffing, and non-core activities that drain resources and divert attention from core business. Next slide, please. Now we turn to traffic. Next slide. Changing patterns of trade are contributing to growth in railway freight. In the last few decades, trade between CARIC countries and the EU has risen sharply. Trade between the PRC and other CARIC countries has skyrocketed. Given the lack of ocean shipping options, much of this is transported over land, a great opportunity for the railways. I've got a few points on the charts. First, by 2018, CARIC railway freight reached 1.4 billion tonnes. This is substantial by any standards. Second, traffic is growing steadily. Third, the large railways of Kazakhstan, shown in orange, and the 2 PRC regions in blue, have much higher traffic than all the other CARIC railways. Next slide, please. Looking at the traffic of each railway, the freight turnover of the largest railways is high and still growing steadily. Among the mid-sized railways, turnover has been growing in Mongolia and Turkmenistan, but declining in Azerbaijan and Georgia. For the former branch lines, turnover, as shown on the y-axis, is very low with a declining trend. Among railways needing major renewal or network development, Afghanistan's traffic is still very low due to the small network. Unfortunately, the growth I've shown for Pakistan is a bit misleading. Freight turnover collapsed in 2011 and 2012 due to acute shortages of rolling stock. Traffic then gradually recovered to pre-collapse levels. Next slide. As the next chart shows, most Carrick Railway freight is bulk commodities. When we further analyze composition, 2/3 of freight volume is comprised of fossil fuels and other high emission commodities like cement. Carrick Railways now need to start examining how future decarbonisation will affect this traffic and develop strategies to offset declines in high emission commodities by attracting other types of freight such as container traffic. Next slide, please. A recent trend has been the rapid rise of railway container traffic to and from the PRC. By 2020, the PRC's Inner Mongolia and Xinjiang regions were carrying 1.2 million TEU, and Kazakhstan similar volumes, with rises also in Mongolia. As the table shows, there's also been rapid growth in services between the PRC and Central Asia. In 2018, these were 1/3 of all the block trains. PRC Europe block trains have mainly used the Trans-Siberian and Northern Transasian corridor. PRC Central Asia block trains use the TITR. Due to the war in Ukraine, the freight industry is now urgently trying to organize alternative routes for PRC Europe block trains. This could potentially mark the beginning of a longer-term shift towards greater use of the Eurasian corridors south of the Trans-Siberian. Next slide. There are several critical obstacles to railway competitiveness. Next slide. In each country, we interviewed shippers, freight forwarders, and transport companies to get market feedback on railway service quality and customer orientation. Many were critical of service quality, efficiency, and competitiveness. They said it was hard to do business with railways as they usually didn't have a proper customer interface and weren't willing to adjust prices or service quality. Overall, railways were only considered competitive for bulk commodities and some containerized traffic. The market view was that railways would have to improve their commercial orientation a lot before they could hope to attract other types of freight. Next slide. AW's Carrick Corridor Monitoring Programme shows that delays and high costs for border crossing are a big problem for railway competitiveness. In North America and the EU, train crossings typically take less than an hour, but on the Carrick corridors, they take on average 21 hours. Railway freight spends as much time crossing borders as it does being transported along the tracks. The worst delays are at borders that require gauge change. Issues there include transshipment capacity, wagon availability, and marshalling arrangements. On top of the delays, another major issue is the level of official and unofficial charges at the border. On average, these add a staggering 25% to journey cost. Next slide. Weaknesses in ports and shipping are a further major obstacle for the TITR and other multimodal corridors. Many shippers avoid these routes because of the high cost and likelihood of delays. Sea crossings and transshipment between trains and vessels are unreliable and extended delays are common. Shipping and port charges are high. While the Caspian ports have been expanded, Georgia's Black Sea ports still need to be upgraded. Problems at the ports include frequent downtime due to poor weather, inefficient logistics for movements within the port, and outdated ship clearance procedures. On the Caspian, there are too few suitable vessels such as container feeders, service frequency is low, and services don't follow a schedule. Next slide. Next slide. The study identifies a set of foundational reforms all Carrick Railways should implement if they haven't done already. These include strengthening Railways' mandate to operate on a commercial basis, establishing a commercial accounting system at ERP, transitioning to the holding company model, giving Railways more freedom to adjust tariffs, removing the burden of cross-subsidy, and where possible, devolving local passenger services. Next slide. Beyond the foundational steps, several other reforms should be considered for early implementation. These include removing most other aspects of tariff regulation, programs to separate non-core activities and address overstaffing, and introducing private sector participation in areas that complement the railway, things like provision of rolling stock and freight terminals, and partnering to strengthen railway sales and marketing. Next slide. Over the medium term, some countries could potentially transition to a separated railway model. This could improve efficiency through competition and attract private investment, reducing the need for government financing. Countries with larger railways have enough traffic to support multiple operators. Groups of other countries could support multiple operators if they integrate their markets. I'd like you to run through the next 2 or 3 slides. I'm going to skip some slides. Alongside sector reform, much needs to be done to upgrade commercial practices and systems in the railway and in the ports and shipping. I encourage you to look at the study for some of the details of these commercial practices that are needed. My concluding slides examine options for railway investment. Now, let me just look at this more carefully. Well, as I've said, there are a range of missing links and other needs of railways, and they tend to vary depending on the traffic characteristics and the size of the railway. Let me just quickly run through these. Missing links, there are a number of well-known missing links. I'm going to talk about those in a few moments. Amongst the busier railways, capacity increases such as double tracking or electrification, there are needs for those. Amongst the not so busy railways, there are backlogs of track rehabilitation. Among many of the railways, there are backlogs of the need to modernize signaling systems. Now, rolling stock is a special case where there are serious rolling stock shortages across the region, and much of the rolling stock fleet is already past its working life. So if you were to, if you take the items that are past their working life and come up with a rough unit cost for a wagon, the cost of making good this expired rolling stock is probably in the region of at least $6 billion. It's a massive area for financing. Finally, freight terminals all over the region. Freight terminals are inadequate and often not really geared to what the private sector and the customers need at this, the key interface between the customers and the railway. Next slide, please. Before we look into the various possible investments, we thought, well, actually, let me step back. We developed a regional transport model for Carrick, one that projects traffic flows on the main corridors, including both railway and highway traffic, and then can be used to examine what traffic flows might be in various scenarios. One scenario we thought was important to look at was the frictionless case. Since the border crossing problem and also the delays in ports are such a serious issue, we asked, well, if tomorrow the countries were to fix these problems and the major corridors could function in a way like they did before 1991, how much extra traffic would this attract? And the answer was that nearly all of the major corridors would have a traffic increase of at least 25%. Now, if you come back to what I mentioned earlier, with a traffic volume of 1.4 billion tons, that's several 100 million tons of extra traffic if countries sort out the problem at the borders and the slowness in the ports. So one cannot stress this enough. Whilst there are some important railways that need to be, links that need to be built, railways will be greatly improved by sorting out the borders. Next slide, please. On this map, I've just shown 9 possible investment project interventions that we examined. They are essentially the several options to connect west and south from Kashgar in PRC, the various sections of Afghanistan's ring railway network to provide through connections to Pakistan's ports, the Pakistan's CPEC port connecting all the way up to Kashgar, upgrading the capacity of Uzbekistan's northwestern corridor, which for some traffic should offer a shorter route than the current route used, the parallel route to the Caspian and North Caspian on the TITR. And then across in the east, there are new links in Mongolia to provide an additional connection to the Chinese border and a new eastern transit corridor to address the saturation on the Trans-Mongolian corridor. Next slide, please. Now we can look at what the model said. If these were built, what would the traffic levels be in 2030? Now we looked at 2 scenarios for each of these cases. First, that only that intervention is built. Second, that all the missing link interventions are built. The purpose of this second test was to check whether traffic was robust and would not easily divert away when other things were developed. Obviously, this is just looking at traffic. It is not a pre-feasibility study, but 4 routes showed some promise worthy of further pre-feasibility or feasibility study, depending on what work has already been done on these projects. As I mentioned, the Uzbekistan Northwestern Corridor is promising, and it seems to have reasonable traffic in 2030, and it doesn't fall away when other links are built. One of the more promising routes is the so-called China-Kyrgyz Republic Uzbekistan Railway, the CKU Railway, number 2, the northern route to Uzbekistan from PRC via Kyrgyz Republic. This seems to have high traffic and the traffic is retained. Similarly, both routes for Mongolia seem to have reasonable traffic levels and be reasonably robust. And in fact, the CPEC project on its own would attract reasonable traffic levels, but once other connections linking Central Asia to Pakistan's ports were built, one would expect traffic to increase a lot. The last point is that there were several possible investments that showed some promise if only they were built, but would lose nearly all their traffic and therefore not be a good investment if all interventions were built. Those included some of the proposed missing links in Afghanistan. Those are that completes the investments. There are some promising missing links to help complete the networks. I encourage you to look at these in the more detailed work in the study. Next slide, please. Thank you, Madam Moderator, for whatever leniency you've shown me. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyrrell, for a very interesting and informative presentation. I did not have the heart to stop you. So, very interesting. Thank you so much. So let's move on to our next session in today's program. This is a short video presentation looking at the 1ADB approach. It's the 1ADB transport video, which will focus on knowledge solutions for urban mobility projects. And it illustrates the implementation of ADB's Strategy 2030 and our commitment to the international agreements. Can we have the video, please?
The National Capital Region, or NCR, is the largest urban agglomeration in India and centered around India's capital city, New Delhi, and encompasses several surrounding districts. With a total population of more than 46 million that is spread over an area of over 58,000 square kilometers, NCR generates nearly 8% of India's GDP. However, most of the socio-economic development of NCR has been centered around Delhi, which accounts for 37% of the total population of NCR, while covering less than 5% of the NCR area. With Delhi projected to be the most populous city in the world in 2028, there will be tremendous pressure on its infrastructure that will cost 12% of Delhi's GDP in terms of air pollution, fatalities, wasted fuel, and reduced productivity. Thus, there is a need to shift to polycentric developmental approach where surrounding parts within NCR are able to absorb this pressure from Delhi. The Functional Plan on Transport for NCR 2032 has identified 8 regional rapid transit systems, RRTS, corridors to connect the towns in NCR with high-speed rail-based commuter transit services. 3 regional rapid transit system corridors, Delhi-Meerut, Delhi-Alwar, and Delhi-Panipat, will be developed under Phase 1, with Sarai Kale Khan as the common station. The first corridor connecting Delhi to Meerut will span a distance of 82 kilometers and have world-class transport infrastructure supporting average speeds of 100 kilometers per hour. It is expected to reduce the travel time from 3.5 hours to about 1 hour. Asian Development Bank will co-finance the capital expenditure and envisages a 3-pronged outcome from the project: commissioning the Delhi-Meerut RRTS corridor, strengthening the institutional capacity of NCRTC, improving mobility and economic opportunities for women and differently abled. ADB will provide finance plus support that will include building multimodal integrated station, technical assistance for exploring transit-oriented development, and selection of a shadow operator. The project will have well-lit and CCTV cameras, supervised coaches, and public areas in all stations, as well as patrolling by security guards to ensure safety of women. Further, mobility, visual, and hearing assistive aids will be provided to 1,000 differently abled persons. Overall, the project is expected to have a substantial demonstration effect and pave the way for integrated mobility and sustainable development of NCR.
Thank you for that, and a very, very interesting and challenging project, but I think also a very essential project. Now, in the next section in this session, we would hear from our partners, GIZ, and they have, again, a very interesting presentation and discussion on decarbonization of transport in Asia and they adopt an action-oriented approach. Let me introduce the presenters for the session. We have Arda Eichhorst, who is the project director, NDC Transport Initiative for Asia, GIZ. Arda currently heads the NDC Transport Initiative for Asia, which supports GIZ partner countries in NDC implementation in the transport sector. In her CV, she says she enjoys coordinating and cooperating to deliver a paradigm shift towards full decarbonization of the sector, and is also very interested in adaptation and resilience of transport systems, with the overall objective of sustainable mobility for all. The second presenter is Alok Jain. Alok is the CEO and Managing Director of Trans Consultant, a management consulting firm specializing in advisory services for technology-driven public transport operation and management. He is an international expert trainer with the International Association of Public Transport, a fellow of Civic Exchange, and serves in the Council for Decarbonization Transport in Asia. The third presenter is Glinda Bathan-Batrina, who is the Deputy Executive Director of Clean Air Asia. She's a lawyer with more than 20 years of experience in policy development for clean air, sustainable transport, and climate change mitigation. She has worked on the Philippine Clean Air Act, implementing rules, and led the Asia Clean Fuels and Vehicle programs, which resulted in cleaner fuels and vehicle policies in Vietnam and Philippines. She is also a member of the Council for Decarbonizing Transport in Asia. With this, Arda, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to say that I'm very honored to be here today in order to launch the flagship publication of the Council for Decarbonizing Transport in Asia. And I'm very happy to be here with Alok and Glinda, who, as mentioned, are two members of the Council, which was set up under the NDC Transport Initiative for Asia. The NDC Transport Initiative is actually a collaboration project of 7 organizations that GIZ is coordinating on behalf of the German Ministry of Environment. And we have set up this council in order to promote a critical dialogue on the full decarbonization of transport in Asia, bringing together 14 experts and practitioners from the region to support us in this critical dialogue and in our outreach activities beyond our partner countries in China, India, and Vietnam under the initiative. And I'm very happy to be here today, able to launch this report after about a year that the council has been set up, and a row of council meetings and discussions that have taken place over the past year. And being today at the point where we can launch the report is excellent. So we have prepared a short video for that, and following Glinda and Alok will have a bit of a commentary on the video as well. And I'm looking forward to present to you through the video also some of the other members of the council. So if we could have the video, please.
Climate change are
Yeah.
already felt globally because of rising temperatures, with Asia being one of the most vulnerable. In the region, transport emissions are expected to increase another 48% between 2015 and 2050 if policies don't change. That is why the Council for Decarbonizing Transport in Asia has come together to plan the transformation of transport and promote a goal of zero carbon transport in Asia by mid-century. This is the path to zero carbon transport.
We are far, quite far actually, from where we want to achieve in terms of net zero by 2050.
With passenger transport, it has moved a bit faster than other sectors. For freight, net zero just started, especially for intercity, long-distance freight.
With growing vehicle ownership, Asian cities are in forefront of facing a number of challenges such as air pollution, traffic congestion, road accidents, and fatalities.
So I think one of the primary issues that is holding us back is the lack of awareness and the lack of collective consciousness.
The environmental concerns are now seen as big issue, but concrete policy measures are still scanty.
We have somehow not put a lot of focus on freight or water transport when it comes to electrification or decarbonization.
To me, one of the blind spots is the fact that we don't recognize the diversity at the table when we're making policies. We need to include things like safety, especially for women, for example.
At the grassroots level, at the citizen level, I think there is obviously this overarching feeling that I alone cannot do much. You know, what can I do if I change myself?
As a community, how do we revision our cities? How do we revision transport?
It will be the planning of important hubs.
Railways in Asian countries, except a few one, is in shambles. So that is required, because for the transfer of the traffic from the road to rail is important.
It's on the policy to discourage using of fossil fuel.
Electrification is one of these solutions.
Linkages between all of them need to be understood, and they need to be made evident to communities and to people, so that people also feel that, they are playing a role in finding the solution.
With all of this in mind, our vision for an efficient and prosperous transport system by mid-century can be achieved. Imagine a safer and healthier Asia, with fewer and only clean vehicles on the roads and more freight being transported sustainably.
We must act now. Shall we? Yeah, I think you're on mute.
Alok, over to you.
So thank you everyone, and for watching this. And this report, we think, is particularly timely, especially after the recent announcement of IPCC, which also highlighted the fact, the elephant is in the room and we can't ignore it. And what IPCC report also said, that the window of opportunity to act is closing very, very fast. So we have to act immediately. Asia, why Asia? And Asia, because it has an outsized footprint. More than half the world population lives in Asia, out of which more than half lives in just two countries, China and India. And we have a very small footprint in the global GHG and emissions. But still, the way Asia is growing, the way economic aspirations of this continent are, we see that this is going to have a big impact. And this is one area of carbon emissions which is still growing, and there is no control to it. So more than 90% of the transport emissions are actually still fossil fuel based. The use of regenerative or reusable energy is very, very low at the moment in the transport sector. The good news is that a lot of these technologies are already available. They are being developed very quickly. In last 15 years, we have seen big increase in electrification or using electricity as one of the key means to move vehicles, especially in the urban sector. And I think this transition has to be done very, very quickly. The report is quite timely because it not just talks about that everybody already knows, pollution and issues like that we are all aware of, but it also talks about a number of issues which not many people are talking about, which are what we call blind spots in the report. And these blind spots are something that we would like to highlight through our work within the region. And this report is good for everyone. I think it's a ready reckoner for all stakeholders, from policymakers to grassroots civil society workers. It will help them to guide their messaging pathways on how we can actually make those commitments and not only improve the global, the GHG problem globally, but also look at the local level, the public safety issues, public health issues, AQI, and all those things can be addressed through this. So over to you, Glinda.
Alok and Urda, I think the report launched today articulates so well the vision for decarbonized transport in 2050, which is that the mobility needs of all citizens are met with zero carbon options that are integrated in a seamless, efficient, and convenient manner. Now that the report has been launched, the question on the minds of many, including the participants in this forum, is what comes next? We, the council members, would really like that the vision and the recommendations in this report be spread widely. To do this, we need to engage with others in the region working on decarbonizing transportation, working with all sectors, starting with governments, private sector, development institutions, civil society groups, NGOs, and academia. We need to start a discussion in Asia on how to develop strategies at the national level. And a good way to do this would be having online meetings on how to put the recommendations into action, as well as presenting the messages at key transport events, such as this Transport Forum, my organization's flagship event, Clean Air Asia's Better Air Quality Conference, UNCRD's Environmentally Sustainable Transport Forum, among others. Leadership from national governments is key in this journey. Working with champions in government is critical. We need to have conversations with national governments, starting with the transport, energy, environment, and climate change ministries on the needed strategies, policies, and implementation essentials, including budgets, regulation, coordinating local action. Now, some policies take some time to put in place. However, as the report says, there are policies that can be implemented now, such as removing fossil fuel subsidies, improving and expanding public transport options, supporting electric vehicles, and charging infrastructure. Finally, for country representatives with us here now and other stakeholders who may want to discuss decarbonization strategies for transport in Asia, we would be happy to hear from you. I request Urda now to tell us how you can get in touch with us.
Thank you very much, Glinda. And if we could have the last slide, please, where you can find our contact details. It's really what I can only reiterate, that we'd be keen to get your feedback, both on the report itself, but also if you're interested in collaborating with us on pushing the decarbonization agenda. We'd be very glad to interact and see which events we could organize together. If you're a policymaker in a country and you're interested to have a discussion on how to move forward on decarbonization strategies in your country, please do get in touch and we'd be happy to organize follow-up events. So thank you everybody very much for your attention and having this opportunity here at the ADB Transport Forum.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Arda, Alok, and Glinda. I think an excellent report and a very good start. Of course, the challenge will be in its implementation. And so Glinda, your message, your call to all participants from implementing agencies on this session is very, very relevant. I'd also like to say that ADB would be delighted to partner with you and try and implement this in our projects going forward. So thank you very much. With this, let's move on to the next part of this. We are running a little behind schedule, but I think So far, everything has been so interesting, and I don't have a heart to stop any presenter in the midst of their discussion. Next session, we would be looking at road safety, and to some extent, this would answer a question that's been already raised on financing these strategies related to decarbonization of the transport sector. So we have with us Rob McKendry to be discussing the financing modalities and technical innovations. Rob is the Chief Executive Officer of the International Road Assessment Program, or IRAP, which is a registered charity with a vision for a world free of high-risk roads. The road assessment program projects and programs are now active in over 70 countries worldwide. And Rob works closely with key automobile clubs, political and technical leaders to build local capacity and deliver large-scale and long-term road safety benefits. So Rob, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Sujata, and good morning to you all today. Next slide, please. As all of the speakers have highlighted, road safety is one of the biggest challenges that we are facing worldwide. And I think we're all familiar with road fatalities being a big problem, being the biggest killer of young people in the world. That's a tragic outcome of mobility, but that is only the tip of the iceberg. Beneath that are the life-changing injuries that more than 100,000 people suffer each and every day on the world's roads. Over the next decade, that will cost the global economy more than $24 trillion US. So we've developed a knowledge resource for you to explore what is the cost of trauma in your country, and you can access that at vaccinesforroads.org. Next slide, please. But when we reflect on this scale of the problem, the United Nations has responded, and there is a Sustainable Development Goal target to halve road deaths and injuries by 2030. There is the global mandate for action on a scale that needs to change our approach and mentality for addressing road safety and dealing with it in parallel with the sustainable cities and the climate change agenda as well. Next slide, please. So as Sujata mentioned, IRAP's work as a charity is to work in partnership with countries all around the world. Next slide, please. And we are now doing that in more than 100 countries worldwide. That impact now extends across 3 million kilometres of roads and over $80 billion of investment made safer. Next slide, please. And as we do that work around the world, it's in partnership with our donors like the FIA Foundation and of course the Asian Development Bank, who we are working with countries right across the Asia Pacific region, from Kazakhstan to Samoa and all the countries in between. And those partnerships are ultimately about building local capacity for countries to lead and deliver their own road assessment programs, whether that's MyRAP in Malaysia, India RAP, China RAP, Thai RAP, and others. And we encourage each country to embrace and establish their own national program. Next slide, please. So importantly, we have some resources available for you all to access and to use. There is one thing that unites every country on earth, and that is road trauma. And so we don't need to reinvest all of the tools and the specifications and the standards to do that. And IRAP as a charity has developed these tools and resources that are available for free for countries right around the world. They include crash mapping, where we look at the geographical location of crashes in your city, in your country, but then also the star rating of roads, where 1 star is the least safe and 5 star is the safest. And we do that through surveys of the road networks, recording all of the attributes that matter, whether it be for pedestrians, for cyclists, for motorcyclists, or for vehicle occupants. And then we can create that data on a global standard level that can be adopted worldwide and applied systematically, not only at a city level, at a country level, but also regionally right across Asia Pacific. Next slide, please. And so when we look at the evidence base that has been created for this, we see this very clear relationship between star ratings of road infrastructure and the level of death and injury. If we can upgrade a road from 1 star to 2 star, we will halve the level of death and injury. We will halve that level of death and injury again, getting to 3 star and forwards to 4 and 5 star. So because of that, the United Nations and the global member states have established 12 global road safety performance targets. One of them, target 3, is that all new roads should be built to a 3 star or better standard for all road users. And target 4, that we progressively raise travel such that 75% of travel for all road users is at that 3 star or better global standard. And they've now been embedded into the UN Global Plan for the Decade of Action for Road Safety through to 2030. And the links will be provided to you for those resources. Next slide, please. So that takes me to the next question, which is how do we finance on a large scale this infrastructure to a 3 star or better standard? And we've been working with the Asian Development Bank on results-based financing approaches to doing this. Quite simply, the government sets the target. We want 75% of travel 3 star or better by 2030. We then undertake the IRAP assessments using local resources within government, local supplier networks to get the star ratings, but also the business case for the upgrades. How many lives will we save and what are the economic benefits? We can then bring in innovative public and private sector financing to upgrade those roads, calculate the benefits and build those into annual dividend streams that support the upfront capital investment in infrastructure. Now, whether it's India, Indonesia, we already have very well-established ways of having PPP partnerships, public-private partnerships, for investing in road infrastructure. We just need to add that road safety performance measure. Next slide, please. So we're now doing that, and we've just released, or the World Bank Group has just released a knowledge report. And if I can go to the next slide, please. The knowledge report is all about mobilizing private sector finance for road safety. Next slide, please. And that report is just released in the last month. And I would recommend that you look at it because it provides innovative ways to attack this financing of road safety. How can we capture the benefits from the future of reduced road trauma and bring that in a way and a mechanism in which we can fund the upfront capital without hitting the fiscal reserves of countries? And we unlock the benefits without the upfront capital cost. And there's a number of ways that we can adapt this new approach to investment across Asia. 10-year partnerships to hit that 75% of travel 3 star or better. Asian highway investment in PPPs to deliver 4 star or better expressways. Motorcycle lanes and an impact bond just for them. Or, as you've talked about the public transport and rail transport previously, can we create 5 star hubs for pedestrians and cyclists around those public transport hubs create the 5-star cities that are both safe and sustainable. Next slide, please. So we're now actually doing this work in practice. And if I can go to the next slide, please. And this is how it works. The World Bank has already launched the first ever global road safety bond. And in simple terms, we have investable projects, raising a 1-star road to 3, 4 or 5-star. We provide the access to the capital so that this can be mobilised behind these investable projects. But also we unlock the benefit streams. The insurance market is $880 billion a year. Health investment in ODA countries is 1.5 trillion. And fleet managers, the market is worth about 20 billion. They all benefit significantly from reduced road trauma. And so the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, European Investment Bank and others are now looking at these blended finance instruments that can actually accelerate and help you reach the Sustainable Development Goal targets. Next slide, please. So again, I wanted to give you a practical example where this is happening already, and that is in Brazil. The gentleman there is Tarcísio Freitas, the Transport Minister in Brazil. They are launching concession roads, public-private partnership roads across Brazil, all with the performance target to reach that 3-star or better standard. Now, the example on the right of your screen is from near the capital, Brasilia, where you can see before the majority of the road was 2 or 3-star performance for safety. With simple engineering countermeasures that are proven, the after there you can see is mostly 5-star performance. And this is all being built into and calculated in advance of the concession even beginning. So we already know the performance that we will create in this results-based financing. Next slide, please. And another example is the PIPA project, again in Brazil, but just to highlight the scale of the investment, $3.4 billion US. 280 million of that is actually going direct to the Sao Paulo government ahead of the investment as part of a concession fee. So it's very sustainable for governments. It's not a big draw on the fiscal reserves. And you can build in this monitoring framework that actually incentivizes getting even better than 3-star or better performance. So on this project that has had the Singapore Sovereign Wealth Fund actually invest in it in Brazil, amongst others, we're actually seeing these bonus arrangements in place. Next slide, please. And just in finishing, some of the other innovations that are happening worldwide is artificial intelligence to use LiDAR, satellite telematics data to generate the star ratings of roads, to generate where 75% of travel is, and in Vietnam with the Asia Injury Prevention Foundation and BOTNA to actually identify high-risk schools across Vietnam. Next. The other one is star rating for designs that we're working on with the Asian Development Bank. And we're actually integrating that with road safety audits in the CARIC region so that you can be sure that your road is hitting 3-star or better before it's built. And importantly, as we move to the sustainable transport agenda, initiatives like Cycle Wrap, making sure that our cyclists have 3, 4 and 5-star performance, as well as star rating for schools, providing for our children and safe journeys to school. These innovations are developed once at a global level and shared for the benefit of everyone. Next slide, please. So just in closing, if we can unlock these partnerships for 2030 impact together with the Asian Development Bank and your governments, we will save lives, save money and create jobs. We will reach the Sustainable Development Goal targets, and we will unlock the potential to save millions of lives and injuries across Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. And in fact, I was going to say exactly that. 50% reduction sounds too little. So good to see a 75% target in mind for road safety. And in some of our projects, we have included this, and this is a big value addition which ADB brings to the project, including in fairly developing countries like the PRC. So thank you for a very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
And very relevant. Okay, so now we are just 5 minutes behind schedule, and we have now the question and answer section. And we have some questions from the audience. So in this case, to have better participation of everyone, I will give priority to the questions from the audience. So let me start with a question that was raised by Arthur Dominique from Indonesia. This was more for, I think, Tyrrell, where he says regulations sometimes often clash between local governments and central government regarding land and the authority and spatial planning. Can this be practiced for Indonesia with continental law-based law? Tyrrell, would you like to comment?
That seems to be a question that would be good to have a lawyer answering. I think that certainly I think that it's a very important area where we can have lots of nice ideas about how we're going to improve the transport network, but sometimes we need to look at the details about land ownership and the jurisdiction of the various authorities, and of course to get all those different parties on board for whatever developments are proposed. Thanks.
Thank you. I have a question for the ADB knowledge solution that was presented on the future of transport. Pam, are the proposed alternative approaches to planning and investments that you discussed already being pioneered by some of ADB's DMCs, and how? Pam, you want to go? Yeah.
Sure. Yes, thanks, Sujata. So actually, as mentioned in our talk show, we did actually conduct various trainings and workshops. So they have been involved in the journey in developing these foresight outputs in terms of the approaches that are described in the playbook. So through the process of this training and workshops where we involved internal ADB staff, as well as external experts, we also tried to fine-tune the process. And now we're actually in conversations with regions like the Pacific to also embark on, kind of like piloting foresight approaches in terms of, how does the future transport sector looks like. So that's all in the making. But perhaps Arndt can also share the broader bank-wide kind of foresight initiatives. Arndt.
Yeah, I think the question also aimed at, how we work with the visions that we created in the report. And that's, I think, still something that's work in progress. So this is a report that looks far out in the future, 2050, and then tries to make suggestions for principles on how we develop strategy and investments, projects that aim at 2030 as a horizon. And all of our suggestions that we make have these different levels of ambition. So now it is for our colleagues who are actually working on projects to look at this as a, let's say, a menu or a buffet with which you can make decisions that are ideas that you can integrate into your planning. So I would say, yes, it's there for the taking. Whether it transforms ADB's future transport investments, we have to see, and we certainly hope that it influences. And so when we now take this to country level, or into a even more fine-grained context, we hope that people will use the playbook that we've published alongside this report to work through this content. And then, once you think about, the zero carbon actually matters in your small project, you will see, I think, a change in thinking. That's certainly the hope that we have.
If I may just add a little on to that, I think the foresight approach is actually is a means of enhancing cross-cutting, cross-sector thematic collaborations. As we know, we have made commitments on Paris Agreement alignment, and then there's also discussions on how do we do just transition, and as well as all these emerging trends on digital and advanced technology. How do we harness all that? So this is basically a set of tools, a way of, a starting point, a structure to support project teams and our developing member countries to, put all this into context, and how do we move forward to vision, to design a desired future. So I think that's what it is. It's a conversation starter. The work is not, it doesn't end here. It needs to be used and, creating shared visions to tackle our shared challenges, which are many, as we know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're getting lots of questions. I'm afraid we won't be able to do all, but let me very quickly pose two questions to the panel. One is for the team from GIZ. Which of the decarbonization actions do you think are priority actions? And then, Rob, you have so many questions coming your way. But I think one question which is important is the ratings are mapped to the contractors that built the roads, or not, or to the entire project, I presume. So this is from Mark. And then you have lots of compliments on your presentation. So yeah, and my question was also, who pays the dividends? You spoke about dividends being paid. So who pays these dividends? So first we'll go to the GIZ team in terms of 3 priorities, and then come to you, Rob. Over.
Thank you very much. Maybe I'll quickly start, and would like to say, pick up 2 things. Pam just mentioned just transition, and this is certainly one thing that came out of the Council's discussion as well, that just transition is really a prerequisite for the future economic development, of course, and really bringing the climate agenda with the economic development agenda together. If we don't do that, then we are bound to fail in our attempts to resolve the climate issue. So really, I think it must become a higher priority to have this integrated view. And I think we're seeing this in some of the countries already, with the climate targets being increasingly integrated into the development agenda and green growth strategy in Vietnam, for instance, in China as well, in the 5-year plan. The climate targets are integrated. So I think that's a good start. And of course, countries are very different, and Asia is very diverse. So we need this country-specific, of course, look at the vision for the particular countries. And yeah, I'd also like to mention, we're very happy to have Jamie from the ADB, Jamie Leather, also as one of the council members. And we see a big, I think, overlap in that approach of the council on the one hand, and the foresight approach with the visioning of ADB. So we hope that we can bring this to more countries in Asia in the future by collaborating even more closely. But I'd like to give it over to Belinda Allop if they'd like to add something.
Thank you. Let's just go quickly to Rob in the interest of time and covering more questions. Rob?
Excellent. Thanks, Sujata. And thank you, everyone, for the great feedback. And in terms of Mark's question about can you track this to contractors, The answer to that is yes. Ultimately, because we've invested in one single global software solution to do the star ratings, for designs, the Asian Development Bank can actually connect that into your performance monitoring framework. We can also track back projects and connect them ultimately to the contractors or the people that are commissioning the works. So that way we can celebrate the great, but also address those areas where the performance standards are not up to where we should be for the global standards and for the SDG targets. The other question, Sujata, you asked was around the who pays the dividend, and that is a really good question. Traditionally, we have been used to putting tolls on our roads, and so it becomes a user pay system. Now, in reality, what we're doing is we are charging people to use the safest infrastructure in the country and leaving behind a burden on our low standard 1 and 2 star roads where people in perhaps worse standard vehicles who can't afford the tolls are driving on the most dangerous roads in the country. Now, the work we're doing with the impact bonds is to understand what is the cost of brain injury and quadriplegia to the insurance industry, or to the health department, or to social welfare. So often some of that is captured in the governments and the health systems, so just a different part of government. So you need to be having discussions at Treasury level to capture those savings and mobilise those into dividend streams. But likewise, you can also bring the insurers into the mix, and even potentially the major logistics suppliers who also stand to benefit from reduced road trauma and a 3-star or better road environment. So really innovative, but ultimately it's about connecting the beneficiaries of road trauma reductions with the solutions, with accelerated financing that gives you the results you want. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I know we're running out of time, but there's an interesting question for Tyrrell. The financial sector, so this is related to Carrick. Railroad companies are mostly loss-making. So what is the situation with ensuring timely infrastructure maintenance expenditures? Tyrrell?
Yes, I like the question. Well, a question, as I had mentioned in the presentation, if you don't make any profits and accumulate reserves, then you generally don't have the normal source of funding for ongoing maintenance of infrastructure or rolling stock. While we have data in the report on the age of the rolling stock, I think it's a very good suggestion, the idea of collecting the data on accidents from the railways and trying to draw out the linkage. What we can say is that the problem with lack of infrastructure maintenance spending, which is inevitable when you don't have any money, that does contribute to accident risks and leads, like in Kyrgyz Republic, to the railway reducing speeds because they can't operate in the normal way because of the state of the infrastructure. But thank you very much. Good question.
Thank you. Thank you. And I have, as the moderator, taken the liberty to exceed the time by 5 minutes. But it's been a very, very informative session and very useful for me in operations department doing transport projects. So I've really personally benefited a lot, and I'm sure so have our audience. And with this, I would like to thank all speakers for their excellent and informative presentations, and of course, interventions from the audience. Thank you all. As we mentioned earlier, the presentations are available on the ADB website and other linked documents from the partners website. So again, a big thanks to all the presenters in the session, as well as the organizers for this. Thank you and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh yes, I was also supposed to mention the next session where, so Mark has put the slide up. It's session 5 and the closing session after that. So hope to see you all again. Have a good day. Bye-bye.